So let's now look at creating deployments in Valahai. I'm going to first show you how it looks like in the UI, and then I'm going to look in the code to see how we actually built that. So we're going to go into deployments, create a new deployment, write my first deployment. Target cluster, we're going to leave as default. When you become a Valahai customer, you can set up a custom Kubernetes cluster on your own environment, and we deploy over there. By default, we deploy into the Valahai environment cluster. Each deployment can have multiple versions in it. So we're going to create our first version. The version name is automatically generated, we can replace that. And we have a list of endpoints here. So each project could have multiple endpoints available. In our case, we only have one, which is digit predict, to predict the handwritten digit with our MNIST classifier. I enabled it, and it's saying that, hey, you need to pass in a model H5 file. So what we're doing is, as part of the deployment, we're asking to get the model file, the trained model file, so we can use that to do the prediction as a part of the deployment effort. So we can choose the one that we just generated 2 minutes ago. Over here, as you saw, you have a full list of all the files that you have gone through. So we can just choose the latest one and create a version. Now this will create a new version of deployment. You see over there, it says building image, download and input. You can always disable endpoints and disable versions to manage multiple versions, enable and disable them, and make sure that you're serving all the right versions that you should be. Now it's going to build the image. Essentially what it's doing is getting a Docker container, Docker image, building up the container. Once that is...
Sorry.
Well, so our deployment is now done. So what actually happened is it went to download a Docker image, spin up a container, start our prediction script in it, use the model file that we provided, and now it's ready to predict things. We have this endpoint, this URL over here. If we send an image with a handwritten digit to that endpoint, it will predict the number back to us. Amazing. So let's look at how this is actually done. So let's start off by going into our Valahai YAML file, our configuration file. Over there, we've set up a new endpoint. That endpoint is called digit predict and has a description. Then we define what's the image. We're using the same image that we used as part of the training, except we're not using GPUs right now. So we're just saying use the standard TensorFlow 2, Python 3 without GPU. Now, the next line, VSGI. So you can either define Valahai endpoints to kickstart a Python server to manage serving up the site and the prediction. Can be either through the VSGI interface, or it can be any server command. So you can actually pass here, instead of VSGI, you can say server command, my custom server.py, and that's going to run a my custom server.py instead of the VSGI. But in our case, we're just going to use VSGI. We're going to say that use predict, that's the predict.py, and from inside it, use my predictor for these predictions. We're going to look at in a second what does that file look like. And then we're seeing files. Now these files are basically what is required, what kind of files are required to be able to create this deployment type. We're saying we want a model file, and it should be found then from path model.h5. The model file is something that we chose from the drop-down menu when we created the deployment. Again, the Valahai YAML configuration is defining how does that whole deployment look like, and it's populated based on the information we have over here. Good. Now let's look at our predict.py. So what do we have over here? We have essentially two things. We have our read input and our my predictor. Remember, my predictor is the one that we call from our YAML file. We said over here, predict, my predictor should be the one that we serve up. We're not going to go into massive detail on the predict.py, but you can find it in our Valahai Quick Start. So you can go in step by step to see how to build it yourself. But we have our my predictor. What it does, it gets the request, loads the model. This is the model h5 file that we have. Does a read input, which is over here. A read input is basically checking, are we getting a post request and does it have an image in the requested files? And if it does have an image, load it up for us so we can use it. Once that is completed, we check if there is an image, proceed. If there's not an image, just respond with no image. That's done. Otherwise, proceed. And we're proceeding to do a prediction. We're using the model file the model.predict classes and then passing in the image. This is TensorFlow telling us what was the prediction. And then we're generating a response that we will show to the user to say, hey, this is the predicted digit. We're doing JSON in this case and sending back the response. That's essentially what's happening here. I know there's quite a lot of lines, but essentially that's what's happening. Good. Let's then add all of these files, run a new commit, added deployment, and git push to push a new version into our Git. Once the new version is pushed, we can go to our project. Here we go. We can say fetch repository. This will go and fetch a new commit version. And now we can go to deployments. We already had one deployment over here. It's the same thing. So we didn't change anything. Go create a deployment, choose the model file, kick things off. This is great that you don't need to pass the model file as part of the actual code and the actual YAML. You just say, what's the model file that I should get? And you can select it over here when you create the deployments. Once the version is up and running, you have this message. It says 100% available deployment has minimum availability. If we go to this URL, what's going to happen? Boom, no image. Because we just navigated to the page, we didn't actually send it a request. Now you can send a curl, use curl to send an image to this, or use Postman or whatever you want. You also have inside of Valohai test deployment functionality. If we go to test deployment, select an endpoint, add an image, add a file, a field. We're going to name that image and choose type file. And then we're going to choose number 7. So this is a handwritten number 7 image. And we're going to send this request. So what's going to happen? We're going to send this image to this address as a post request. Remember, we were checking, is it post and does it have an image? If so, then we do the prediction. Send request. What came back? 200. Everything is okay. Predicted digit number 7. Right. Perfect. So it works. This is great for online inference, and when you want to expose an endpoint that people can poll and send their request and get the prediction real time. If you would like to create a batch inference step, you actually create it as a step in the YAML. So batch inference is better done through an execution than through the deployment functionality. This is just great for, I want an endpoint that people can send their requests to, and I will send them back the predicted values. Perfect. That's it. That's done. You can head on to our documentation, to our quick starts to learn more about how Valohai works and how these different functionalities work. Thank you.